Hey, Daler. You made some great renovations to your home since last stream, I see. Yeah. I added a nice fireplace and a whole bunch of bookshelves. Some nice leather chairs. Um, yeah, it's a lot of work. That's why I haven't been streaming. Anyway, we will be reading. Actually, this is upside down, or is it right side up? Oh, it's upside down. Hear that? There we go. Grimm's Fairy Tales. Oh, it is two words. I spelled it as one. My bad. Although they were originally written in German, and this is an English translation, so technically it could be either way. Could be one word. All right. So, um, let's see. Hey, Angela, thanks for showing up. Reading stream, lurk hype. Thank you very much for lurking. Heading out the door, but take the view I go. Thank you very much for being here. This will probably be a little bit. Oop, don't move my chair too much. A little bit shorter of a stream just to see how everything goes and see how everything sounds and stuff. Um, but we will get right into it. We are reading Rumpelstiltskin. Oh, whoa. There we go. Rumpelstiltskin. It's a white book. It shouldn't have been hit by the chroma key. Once there was a miller who was poor, but who had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened that he had to go and speak to the king, and in order to make himself appear important, he said to him, I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold. The king said to the miller, That is an art which pleases me well. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace, and I will try what she can do. And when the girl was brought to him, he took her into a room which was quite full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning early you have not spun this straw into gold during the night, you must die. Thereupon he himself locked up the room and left her in it alone. She sat, the poor miller's daughter, and for her life could not tell what to do. She had no idea how straw could be spun into gold, and she grew more and more miserable, until at last she began to weep. But all at once the door opened, and in came a little man, and said, Good evening, Mistress Miller. Why are you crying so? Alas, answered the girl, I have to spin straw into gold, and I do not know how to do it. What will you give me, said the mannikin, if I do it for you? My necklace, said the girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself in front of the wheel, and whir, whir, whir. 3 turns, and the reel was full. And then he put another on, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the second was full too. And so it went until the morning, when all the straw was spun, and all the reels were full of gold. By daybreak the king was already there, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and delighted. But his heart became only more greedy. He had the miller's daughter taken into another room of straw, which was much larger, and commanded her to spin that also in one night, if she valued her life. The girl knew not how to help herself, and was crying, when the door opened again, and the little man appeared and said, What will you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you? The ring on my finger, answered the girl. The little man took the ring again, began to turn the wheel, and by morning had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king rejoiced beyond measure at the sight, but still he had not gold enough. And he and the miller's daughter taken into a still larger room full of straw, and said, You must spin this too, in the course of this night, but If you succeed, you shall be my wife. Even if she is a miller's daughter, thought he, I could not find a richer wife in the whole world. When the girl was alone, the mannikin came again for the third time and said, What will you give me if I spin the straw for you this time also? I have nothing left that I could give, answered the girl. Then promise me, if you do become queen, your first child. Who knows whether that will even happen, thought the miller's daughter. And, not knowing how else to help herself in this strait, she promised the mannikin what he wanted, and for that he once more spun the straw into gold. And when the king came in that morning, and found all she had wished, he took her in marriage, and the pretty miller's daughter became a queen. A year after, she had a beautiful child, and she never gave a thought to the mannikin. But suddenly he came into her room and said, Now, give me what you have promised. The queen was horror-struck, and offered the mannikin all the riches of the kingdom if he would leave her the child. But the mannikin said, No. Something that is living is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world. Then the queen began to weep and cry, so that the mannikin pitied her. I will give you 3 days' time, said he. If by that time you find out my name, then shall you keep the child. So the queen thought the whole night of all the names she had ever heard, and she sent a messenger over the country to inquire, far and wide, for any other names there might be. When the mannikin came the next day, she began with Gaspar, Melchior, Balthasar, and said all the names she knew, one after another, but to every one the little man said, That is not my name. On the second day she had inquiries made in the neighborhood as to the names of the people there, and she repeated to the mannikin the most uncommon and curious. Perhaps your name is Short Ribs, or Sheepshanks, or Laceleg? But he always answered, That is not my name. On the third day the messenger came back again and said, I have not been able to find a single new name, but as I came to a high mountain at the end of the forest where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, there I saw a little house, and before the house a fire was burning. And round that fire quite a ridiculous little man was jumping. He hopped upon one leg and shouted, Today I bake, tomorrow brew. The next I'll have the young queen's child. Ha! Glad I am that no one knew that Rumpelstiltskin I am styled. You may think how glad the queen was when she heard that name. And when soon afterwards the little man came in and asked, Now, Mistress Queen, what is my name? At first she said, Is your name Conrad? No. Is your name Harry? No. Perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin. The devil has told you that. The devil has told you, cried the little man, and in his anger he plunged his right foot so deep into the earth that the whole leg went in, and then in a rage he pulled at his left leg so hard with both hands that he tore himself in two. The end. Alright, that was Rumpelstiltskin. And, yeah. If you haven't actually heard that version, you probably didn't know that Rumpelstiltskin ripped himself in half when she said his name. That was a new one for me. Let's see what else we have. Maybe another common, well-known one. this is a short one. I'll try this one. The Hare's Bride. There was once a woman and her daughter who lived in a pretty garden with cabbages, and a little hare came into it, and during the winter time ate all the cabbages. Then says the mother to the daughter, "Go into the garden and chase the hare away." The girl says to the little hare, "Shh, shh, hare, you are still eating up all our cabbages." Says the hare, "Come, maiden, and seat yourself on my little hare's tail, and come with me into my little hare's hut." The girl will not do it. Next day the hare again comes and eats the cabbages. Then says the mother to the daughter, "Go into the garden and drive the hare away." The girl says to the hare, "Shh, shh, little hare, you are still eating all the cabbages." The little hare says, "Maiden, seat thyself on my little hare's tail, and come with me into my little hare's hut." The maiden refuses. The third day the hare comes again and eats the cabbages. On this the mother says to the daughter, "Go into the garden and hunt the hare away." Says the maiden, "Shh, shh, little hare, you are still eating all our cabbages." Says the little hare, "Come, maiden, seat thyself on my little hare's tail, and come with me to my little hare's hut." The girl seats herself on the little hare's tail, and the hare takes her far away to his little hut, and says, "Now cook green cabbages and millet seed, and I will invite the wedding guests." Then all the wedding guests assembled. Who were the wedding guests? That I can tell you as another told it to me. They were all the hares. The crow was there as person to marry the bride and bridegroom, and the fox as a clerk, and the altar was under the rainbow. The girl, however, was sad, for she was all alone. The little hare comes and says, open the doors, the wedding guests are merry." The bride says nothing but weeps. The little hare goes away. The little hare comes back and says, take off the lid, the wedding guests are hungry." The bride again says nothing and weeps. The little hare goes away. The little hare comes back and says, take off the lid, the wedding guests are waiting." Then the bride says nothing, and the hare goes away. But she dresses a little straw doll in her clothes, and gives her a spoon to stir with, then sets her by the pan with the millet seed, and goes back to her mother. The little hare comes once more and says, take off the lid, and gets up and strikes the doll on the head, so her cap falls off. Then the little hare sees that it is not his bride, and goes away and is sorrowful. Whew. I'm surprised Disney hasn't turned that into a movie. Let's check the table of contents. See what else we have for some fairy tales. Oh, that's not okay. Oh. Alright, let's go with Cinderella, page 81. That I think everybody is familiar with. It's a little bit longer of a story. The wife of a rich man fell sick, and as she felt that her end was drawing near, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "Dear child, be good and pious, and then the good God will always protect thee, and I will look down on thee from heaven, and be near thee." Thereupon she closed her eyes and departed. Every day the maiden went out to her mother's grave and wept. She remained pious and good. When winter came, the snow spread a white sheet over the grave, and when the spring sun had drawn it off again, the man had taken another wife. The woman had brought 2 daughters into the house with her, who were beautiful and fair of face, but vile and black of heart. Now began a bad time for the poor stepchild. Is the stupid goose to sit on the parlor with us? Said they. He who wants to eat bread must earn it. Out with the kitchen wench. They took her pretty clothes away from her, put an old gray bedgown on her, and gave her wooden shoes. Just look at the proud princess, now decked out she is. They cried and laughed, and led her into the kitchen. There she had to do hard work from morning till night. Get up before daybreak, carry water, light fires, cook and wash. Besides this, the sisters did her every imaginable injury. They mocked her, and emptied her peas and lentils into the ashes, so that she was forced to sit and pick them out again. In the evening, when she had worked till she was weary, she had no bed to go to, but had to sleep by the fireside in the ashes, and as on that account she always looked dusty and dirty. They called her Cinderella. It happened that her father was once going to the fair, and he asked his two stepdaughters that she should bring back for them beautiful dresses, said one. Pearls and jewels, said the second. And though Cinderella said, What will you have, father? Break off from me the first branch which knocks against your hat on your way home. So he brought beautiful dresses, pearls, and jewels for his two stepdaughters. And on his way home, as he was riding through a green thicket, a hazel twig brushed against him and knocked off his hat. Then he broke off the branch and took it with him. When he reached home, he gave his stepdaughters the things which they had wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the branch from the hazel bush. Cinderella thanked him, and went to her mother's grave, and planted the branch on it, and wept so much that the tears fell down on it and watered it. It grew, however, and became a handsome tree. Thrice a day Cinderella went and sat beneath it, and wept and prayed, and a little white bird always came on the tree. And if Cinderella expressed a wish, the bird threw down to her what she had wished for. It happened, however, that the king appointed a festival, which was to last 3 days, to which all the beautiful young girls in the country were invited, in order that his son might choose himself a bride. When the two stepsisters heard that they were to appear among the number, they were delighted, called Cinderella, and said, Comb our hair for us, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles, for we're going to a festival at the king's palace. Cinderella obeyed, but wept because she too would have liked to go with them to the dance, and begged her stepmother to allow her to do so. Thou go, Cinderella, she said, thou art dusty and dirty, and wouldst go to a festival? Thou hast no clothes and shoes, and yet wouldst dance? As, however, Cinderella went on asking, the stepmother at last said, I have emptied a dish of lentils into the ashes for thee. If thou hast picked them out again in 2 hours, thou shalt go with us. The maiden went through the back door in the garden and called, You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds beneath the sky, come and help me pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop. Then 2 white pigeons came in by the kitchen window, and afterwards the turtle doves, and at least all the birds beneath the sky, came whirling and crowding in, and alighted amongst the ashes. And the pigeons nodded with their heads and began to pick, pick, pick. And the rest began to also pick, 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 and gathered all the good grains into the dish. Hardly had 1 hour passed before they had finished, and all flew out again. Then the girl took the dish up to her stepmother, and was glad, and believed now that she would be allowed to go with them to the festival. But the stepmother said, No, Cinderella, thou hast no clothes, and thou canst not dance. Thou wouldst only be laughed at. And as Cinderella wept at this, the stepmother said, If thou can pick 2 dishes of lentils out of the ashes for me in 1 hour, thou shalt go with us. And she thought to herself that she most certainly could not do it. When the stepmother had emptied the 2 dishes of lentils amongst the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and cried, You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds under the heaven, come and help me pick the good into the pot, the bad into the crop. Then 2 white pigeons came in by the kitchen window, and afterwards the turtle doves. And at length all the birds beneath the sky came whirling and crowding in, and alighted almost amongst the ashes. And the doves nodded with their heads and began to pick, 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 and the others also pick, 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 and gathered all the good seeds into the dishes, and before half an hour was over they had already finished, and all flew out again. Then the maiden carried the dishes to the stepmother and was delighted, and believed that she might now go with them to the festival. But the stepmother said, All this will not help thee. Thou goest not with us, for thou hast no clothes, and canst not dance. We should be ashamed of thee. On this she turned her back on Cinderella, and hurried away with her 2 proud daughters. As no one was now at home, Cinderella went to her mother's grave beneath the hazel tree, and cried, Shiver and quiver, little tree, shiver and gold throw down onto me. Then the bird threw a gold and silver dress down on her, and slippers embroidered with silk and silver. She put the dress with all speed, and went to the festival. Her stepsisters and stepmother, however, did not know her, and thought she must be a foreign princess, for she looked so beautiful in the golden dress. They never once thought of Cinderella, and believed that she was sitting at home in the dirt, picking lentils out of the ashes. The prince went to meet her, took her by the hand, and danced with her. He would dance with no other maiden, and never left loose of her hand. And if any one else came to invite her, he said, This is my partner. She danced till it was evening, and then she wanted to go home. But the king's son said, I will go with thee, and bear thee company. For he wished to see whom the beautiful maiden belonged. She escaped from him, however, and sprang into the pigeon house. The king's son waited until her father came, and then he told him that the stranger maiden had leapt into the pigeon house. The old man thought, Can it be Cinderella? And they had to bring him an axe and a pickaxe, and he might hew the pigeon house to pieces. But no one was inside. And when they got home, Cinderella lay in her dirty clothes, among the ashes, and a dim little oil lamp was burning on the mantelpiece. For Cinderella had jumped quickly down from the back of the pigeon house, and had run to the little hazel tree, and there she had taken off her beautiful clothes, and laid them on the grave, and the bird had taken them away again. And then she had placed herself in the kitchen, amongst the ashes, in her grey gown. Next day, when the festival began afresh, and her parents and her stepsisters had gone once more, Cinderella went to the hazel tree and said, Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me. Then the bird threw down a much more beautiful dress than on the preceding day. And when Cinderella appeared at the festival in this dress, everyone was astonished by her. The king's son had waited until she came, and instantly took her by the hand, and danced with no one but her. When evening came she wished to leave, and the king's son followed her, and wanted to see into which house she went. But she sprang away from him, and into the garden behind the house. Therein stood a beautiful tall tree, on which hung the most magnificent pears. She clambered so nimbly between the branches like a squirrel that the king's son did not know where she was gone. He waited until her father came and said to him, "The stranger maiden has escaped from me, and I believe she has climbed up the pear tree." The father thought, "Can it be Cinderella?" and had an axe brought, and cut the tree down, but no one was on it. And when they got into the kitchen, Cinderella lay there amongst the ashes as usual, for she had jumped down the other side of the tree, had taken the beautiful dress to the bird on the little hazel tree, and put on her gray gown. On the third day, when the parents and sisters had gone away, Cinderella went once more to her mother's grave and said to the little tree, "Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold throw down over me." And now the bird threw down her dress, which was more splendid and magnificent than any she had yet had, and the slippers were golden. And when she went to the festival in the dress, no one knew how to speak for astonishment. The king's son danced with her only, and if anyone invited her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, Cinderella wished to leave. The king's son was anxious to go with her, but she escaped from him so quickly that he could not follow her. The king's son had, however, used a stratagem, and had caused the whole staircase to be smeared with pitch, and there, when she ran down, had the maiden's left slipper remained sticking. The king's son picked it up, and it was small and dainty, and all golden. Next morning he went with it to the father, and said to him, "No one shall be my wife but she whose foot this golden slipper fits." Then were the two sisters glad, for they had pretty feet. The eldest went with the shoe into her room and wanted to try it on. Her mother stood by, but she could not get the big toe into it. The shoe was too small for her. Then her mother gave her a knife and said, "Cut the toe off. When thou art queen, thou wilt have no more need to go on foot." The maiden cut the toe off, forced the foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. Then he took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. They were, however, obligated to pass the grave, and there, on the hazel tree, sat the two pigeons, and cried, "Turn and peep, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe. The shoe is too small for her, the true bride waits for you." Then he looked at the foot, and saw how the blood was streaming from it. He turned his horse round, and took the false bride home again, and said she was not the true one, and that the other sister was to put the shoe on. Then this one went into her chamber, and got her toe safely into her shoe, but her heel was too large. So her mother gave her a knife, and said, "Cut a bit of thy heel. When thou art queen, thou wilt have no more need to go on foot." The maiden cut a bit of her heel, forced her foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the king's son. He took her on his horse as his bride, and rode away with her. But when they passed the hazel tree, two little pigeons sat on it and cried, "Turn and peep, turn and peep, there's blood within the shoe." "The shoe, it is too small for her, the true bride waits for you." He looked down at her foot, and saw the blood was running out of her shoe, and how it had stained her white stocking. Then he turned his horse, and took the false bride home again. "This also is not the right one," he said. "Have you no other daughter?" "No," said the man. "There is still a little stunned kitchen wench, which my late wife left behind her, but she cannot possibly be the bride." The king's son said he wanted to send her up to him, but the mother answered, "Oh no, she is much too dirty, she cannot show herself." He absolutely insisted on it, and Cinderella had to be called. She first washed her hands and face clean, and then went and bowed before her king's son, who gave the golden shoe. Then she seated herself on a stool, drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe, and put it into the slipper, which fit like a glove. And when she rose and the king's son looked at her face, he recognized the beautiful maiden who he had danced with, and cried, "That is the true bride." The stepmother and the two sisters were terrified, and became pale with rage. He, however, took Cinderella on his horse, and rode away with her. As they passed the hazel tree, the two white doves cried, "Turn and peep, turn and peep. No blood is in the shoe. The shoe is not too small for her. The true bride rides with you." And when they had cried that, the two came flying down and placed themselves on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right, the other on the left, and remained sitting there. When the wedding with the king's son had to be celebrated, the two false sisters came and wanted to get into favor with Cinderella and share her good fortune. When the betrothed couple went to the church, the elder was at the right side and the younger at the left, and the pigeons pecked out one eye each of them. Afterwards, as they came back, the elder was at the left and the younger at the right, and the pigeons pecked out the other eye of each. And thus for their wickedness and falsehood they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. Wow, I knew about the foot cutting. I didn't know about the eye pecking. It's actually far more extreme than I was expecting. That was dark, wasn't it? Damn. Be nice to your stepfamily, or birds will peck out your eyes. Also, don't cut off body parts to impress a man. So that's how lessons work. Good advice, yeah. Solid. Alright. Let's go with... I'm going to do a smaller one. Oh, we could do Rapunzel. That one's a couple pages. 44. See how grotesque and awful Rapunzel is. There we are. Rapunzel. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power, and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window, looking down into the garden, when she saw a bed which was planted within the most beautiful Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it, and had the greatest desire to eat some. The desire increased every day, and she knew that she could not get any of it. She quite pined away, and looked pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What aileth thee, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can get some of the Rapion, which is in the garden behind our house, to eat, I shall die." The man who loved her thought, "Sooner than let thy wife die, bring her some of the Rapion thyself. Let it cost thee what it will." In the twilight of evening he clambered down over the wall of the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of Rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate with much relish. She, however, liked it so very much, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If she was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden and gloom of everything. Therefore he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How canst thou dare," said she with angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rapion like a thief? Thou shalt suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do so out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from thy window, and felt such a longing for it, that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened, and said to him, "If the case be as thou sayest, I will allow thee to take away with thee as much rampion as thou wilt. Only I make one condition. Thou must give me the child which thy wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything. And when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child beneath the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath this, and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold. And when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them around one of the hooks of the window above, and then her hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and went by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time, letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for the door to the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I will for once try my fortune," said he. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as her eyes had never yet beheld came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him to have no rest, and that he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him from her husband, she saw that he was young and handsome. She thought, "He will love me more than the old Dame Gothel does." And she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with thee, but I do not know how to get down. Bringing with thee a skein of silk, every time that thou comest I will weave a ladder with it. And when that is ready I will descend, and thou wilt take me on thy horse." They agreed, and that until that time he should come every evening. For the old woman came by day, and the enchantress remarked nothing of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in a moment." "Ah, thou wicked child," cried the enchantress, "what do I hear thee say? I thought I had separated thee from all the world, and yet thou hast deceived me. In her anger she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with her right, and snip snap they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in a great grief and misery. On the same day, however, that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress, in the evening, fastened the braids of hair which she had cut off to the hook of the window, when the king's son came and cried, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down thy hair. She let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but he did not find his dearest Rapunzel above, but the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. Ah, she cried mockingly, thou wouldst fetch thy dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out thy eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to thee, thou wilt never see her more. The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did nothing but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in the wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed familiar to him. He went towards it, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again. He could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happily and contented. That ended up taking a turn for the better. I was expecting it to only get worse. Interesting. Alright. About 45 minutes of reading. I think that's a good right now. Yeah, right? Happy ending. I definitely wasn't expecting that. I also wasn't expecting him to fall into thorns and have his eyes poked out, but I suppose that's kind of a motif at this point. So, I think we'll call it there. I'll go look over the footage and see how it looks, hear how it sounds. I felt I had some stumbling over some words issues. Part of the problem is the Old English style in which this was written, which is kind of funny because I'm pretty sure these were originally written in German, so there's no reason for them to be written in Old English. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. I figured throwing up a random stream in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, good chances no one would show up. But it's awesome that you all did, so that's great. And then I will look into doing some more of these streams. I don't know. I do like the reading, but it's also getting my eyes and my mouth to agree on what's happening. Doesn't always work. So we'll I'll try doing that again. Yeah. All right. Thank you everybody who did show up, and